Some very sad news yesterday as I record this, and that was the death of Chris Rea at the age of 74 on the 22nd of December 2025. So tragic in that, of course, the event itself is tragic, but being so close to Christmas as well. 3 days before Christmas. Chris Rea was really known for that song, wasn't he? Driving Home for Christmas. But he was a lot more than that. And what this video is intending to achieve is, it's going to be called a tribute to Chris Rea. But, of course, I didn't know Chris Rea personally, so this cannot be a personal tribute. But this is more like a celebration of the music of Chris Rea, the music that I enjoy from Chris Rea, and hopefully promote you all to do the same down below. So I'm going to get straight into it. It's very sad to hear the news yesterday. It was a surprise, of course. I know Chris Rea had ill health for a lot of his life and suffered. So when I saw, I had a text when I was leaving work yesterday with just Chris Rea at the top, and the first thing, unfortunately, I thought was that maybe it might well have been that Chris Rea, unfortunately, has passed away. But nevertheless, even though it wasn't as much of a surprise as it could have been, it was incredibly sad news. And although I did know Chris Rea personally, a lot of people that have posted their tributes online probably didn't know Chris Rea personally. I think for me, to spend all the time that I have with Chris Rea's music, you start to develop a bit of a personal connection with the person. And therefore, it does make it very sad when the person leaves the world. So I ummed and ahed whether to do this video, because I always think, maybe is it a little bit insensitive? But what today's video is going to be is a celebration of Chris Rea's music and a discussion of how I got into Chris Rea and the albums that I really like. And the key thing is that Chris Rea was so much more than just that one song, Driving Home for Christmas. It's a great song, it is. It's a great Christmas song, but Chris Rea is so much more than that song, Driving Home for Christmas. I was actually really pleased to see yesterday night when I was scrolling through Facebook, and I appreciate that the algorithm is going to show you things that you're interested in or that you've looked at. But just the sheer amount of tributes to Chris Rea, and not just that song, Driving Home for Christmas. We've plaudits for a lot of his musical career. He was really a pop artist early on, late 70s, in the 80s, had some very big albums at the end of the 80s going into the 90s, and then his career sidled into the blues after that. And I don't know everything by Chris Rea, but one album sent me down a rabbit hole which really made 2023 my year for Chris Rea. I've found this in the last few years, that it might be a year, it might be 6 months, but I will find an artist and then just go down a rabbit hole with them. This year it's been Bruce Springsteen. 2023 was Chris Rea. I had the same with the Moody Blues, Pink Floyd, a few other artists as well. The Scorpions has been another one that I've had that relationship with. And it was this album that sent me down that rabbit hole with Chris Rea. It was Auberge, and I remember it like yesterday. I guess it was only 3 years ago, but I was in a charity shop and I knew some of Chris Rea's stuff. I mean, I knew Driving Home for Christmas since I was very young, and I had The Road to Hell on vinyl as well, which I probably listened to once or twice and thought, yeah, that's a good album, but not explored Chris Rea as I had done really with Auberge. And I saw this in a charity shop. It wasn't $6.99 actually, but it was that's the price tag that annoyingly doesn't come off, or it could come off, but it would ruin the top of the cover, so I've just left it on there. And what struck me, of course, was the brilliant artwork on this. And I thought, I think it was £3, £2 or £3. So I thought, I'm going to give this a chance. I've never heard this before, and I'm going to give it a chance. Got it home, put it on the record player, and Auberge starts. And like I say, I remember it like it was yesterday. I know it was only 3 years ago, so it wasn't that long ago, but it's a memory that will stay with me. And the song, that it takes a couple of minutes to start, and there's some funky sounds that you've got, a bit of atmosphere, and then the song kicks in, and I thought, wow, this is really, really good. And this was the album that I reached for last night when I heard the news. I thought, I've got to hear some Chris Rea, and I'd say Auberge is my go-to album. I think it's close between Auberge and The Road to Hell for my favourite two Chris Rea albums. And normally I'm quite contrarian when it comes down to all this stuff, that it's an underground album, or maybe not everyone's favourite album of Chris Rea's that I like, but it is those two that I would say I revisited the most. Of course, those were the two that got to #1 in the UK charts, and Chris Rea could have been absolutely massive. And that's something else with all the tributes on Facebook. I didn't realise, I don't think, just how big and appreciated an artist Chris Rea was. And I suppose really because he got to number 2 with Dancing with Strangers in 87, just behind Michael Jackson's Bad, and then number 1 with these 2 albums, and had relative success before that as well. That I suppose, yeah, he was quite a big thing. And although in the last, I don't think he ever had anything quite as big as this and The Road to Hell after it, commercially. But I don't think really that was what Chris Rea was about. Again, I can't speak personally, but what I've heard, I think I've heard one quote that, look, Chris Rea was just there to create the music, and the plaudits that came from it, great, but the most important thing to Chris Rea was his music and his family. So after I listened to Auberge and was amazed by it, the title track, going back and listening to this last night, this album, Heaven is brilliant, Set Me Free is excellent, but it's side 2, I think, where it really shines. Looking for the Summer just might be my favourite Chris Rea song, and You My Love and The Mention of Your Name are all excellent tracks. So there is one as well that isn't on the original vinyl release, it's on the CD release, and it's a special edition which contains the song, or is it single? So it was a single, Winter Song, which is a really good addition to this album, and the album's in green on this CD as well. Funnily enough, it wasn't last weekend, but the weekend before, I was actually listening to some Chris Rea. I hadn't listened for a while, and I dug this set out that I've got, which is Chris Rea, Era 1, 1978 to 1984. So it's got A's, B's, and rarities. So how this set goes is that it's got an A side, so it's got Fool If You Think It's Over, which was Chris Rea's first hit, and then Midnight Love, which was the B side of that. I do like some of the early era Chris Rea stuff, particularly 2 albums from that era. I've heard all of the albums, but haven't really clicked with the rest of them as I have with one of them at least. The other one is pretty good as well. So Deltics, I like that one. I think that's from 1979, isn't it? His second album. Particularly from that, Raincoat and a Rose, a little bit Elton John-like. Cenotaph and Letter from Amsterdam. Diamonds on this album, really good. And it just shows with an album like this, Auberge, yes, he changed his musical style, but you couldn't put Chris Rea into a box. His music was different, and I don't think you could say, right, he was a pop artist or he was a rock artist. He went more blues later on, and he did change his style, but he was someone you very much couldn't pigeonhole, at least I think. The album that I really like from this early period is Tennis from 1980. And Auberge has probably got the best artwork in my Chris Rea collection, but I have to say this comes pretty close. I've got to show the vinyl for this. And I had the CD first, actually, but bought the vinyl after. I saw this again in a charity shop. I think it was £1 or £2. And if not for the record, I think the artwork on this is fantastic. Really, really like the artwork for Tennis. And it's an album that I really grew into. The title track, I thought at first they're just singing about tennis. Of course, it's a lot more than that in terms of lyrically. But I really like the title track. Since I Don't See You Anymore, Forever and Ever is a great song. Every Time I See You Smile, Good News, Only With You, Stick It. This is a really, really solid album, this is. Really solid album. But he really comes into his own by the time sort of 1985 pops around. So we have from 85... Shamrock Diaries. So on this album there was a successful single. I think Josephine was a fairly successful single, but again it's actually the end of the album that I think's the strongest. Stone, Shamrock Diaries, Love Turns to Lies, and Hired Gun. Really sort of dark, brooding, atmospheric song. I really like that one, Hired Gun. The next album that came around, I have to say I'm not much of a fan of yet. So I'm not going to talk about it too much. On the Beach, I like the title track, but everything else, I have listened to it maybe through once or twice, but haven't explored it all that much. Dancing with Strangers from 1987. Really like the cover to this. And I'm noticing a bit of a funny trend with these Chris Rea albums going through, that it's actually probably the second half that I enjoy more than the first half. So you can't say these are front-loaded at all. This special edition has got Driving Home for Christmas on. The second version of that track, at least, anyway. But Let's Dance was a pretty big single, wasn't it? Que Sera, I really like. Curse of the Traveller, a little bit like Hired Gun, is a longer track. I like that one. Que Sera, Loving You Again, That Girl of Mine. See, Chris Rea, he could do the likes of Hired Gun, which was a dark, that sort of dark and brooding song. That Girl of Mine is just classic sort of, I can't really say rock and roll, but good time pop music, simple pop music really, I would say. That Girl of Mine, that's really good. And then at the end of this album, there's the brilliant, almost morose September Blue. One of his other massive songs was the title track from this album, The Road to Hell. A little bit like Auberge. This is in two parts, the Road to Hell. You can see a reflection of me there. Look, there I am, twice. But The Road to Hell Part 1 and 2. Stood still on a highway, I saw a woman by the side of the road, with a face that I know like my own, reflected in my window. I'm not going to carry on, because I could be here for another 7.5 minutes singing this song. This is another great album. It's, as I say, it's tight between this one and Auberge. I think Auberge is the one I reach for a little bit more. But You Must Be Evil's great. Texas, Looking for a Rainbow. Your Warm and Tender Love. Really like the groove of that song. Daytona's good. Yeah, really, really good stuff from Chris Rea. And it is sad news that we've lost him. But I guess we are coming to the time with some of our favourite artists from the 70s, 80s that they are getting older, and unfortunately, unless anybody knows something that I don't, none of us are immortal, unfortunately, and we all have our time. But what Chris Rea does leave behind is a catalogue of really, really great music. I don't know much of his later stuff. I have got I've got a lot of it. I won't say all of it. I've got a lot of it on CD. Maybe this is the kick up the backside. I need to go and discover some of that a little bit more, possibly. But I think the key thing is that Chris Rea was so much more than that song Driving Home for Christmas. I know he didn't actually want it released. I'm sure he'd have been very happy once it was released, because it was very, very successful. If you are somebody who doesn't want to delve all the way into the Chris Rea albums and just wants a greatest hit set, which is fine, this is a really good one. I picked this up off the shelf just, and the first CD of this is classic after classic after classic after classic. I'll just show it there. CD 1, try not to get a glare on it. So you've got Fool If You Think It's Over, On the Beach, Let's Dance, Diamonds, Loving You, I Can Hear Your Heartbeat, I Don't Know What It Is But I Love It, and then CD 2 is great as well, a couple of new tracks on there as well. So that is a really good double greatest hit set. But again, very sad news to hear yesterday. I heard it just before my drive home, and I did contemplate it on the way home that although it's not somebody that I know personally, of course it is still sad. But what Chris Rea leaves behind is this wealth of excellent music. As I said earlier in the video, just to kind of sum up on getting all my different albums misplaced here. I don't know where is that gone under. It's at the bottom. It's at the bottom. My top two really have to be these two. If I can get that the right way around. The Road to Hell and Auberge. But Dancing with Strangers I like. On the Beach, not quite there yet. But this is a really strong album. Shamrock Diaries. This was his first really sort of mainstream album that did pretty well in the charts. But this is a really good earlier effort as well. I have listened to the other albums. There are good things on them, but I can't talk too much about them. And ultimately, I'm not a Chris Rea historian. I'm just going to talk about what I enjoy. And hopefully this tribute, this celebration, this discussion of Chris Rea's music, hopefully ignites you to maybe go and listen to your favourite Chris Rea album, or maybe your favourite Chris Rea song. And although I've said Chris Rea was so much more than Driving Home for Christmas, if it is Driving Home for Christmas that you like and nothing else, then so be it. You go and enjoy that on this Christmas season. It is, of course, tragic that we've lost him. Even more tragic, I think, that it is so close to Christmas. Similarly in fate to when we lost George Michael 9 years ago on Christmas Day. God forbid. That was a tough one to take. That was when George went in 2016. But I've listened to Auberge, thoroughly enjoyed that. I think I'll probably revisit some of Chris Rea's other albums over the Christmas period and enjoy those. So Chris Rea leaves behind a wealth of fantastic music, some that I enjoy and thoroughly have enjoyed for the last few years, and hopefully will go on to enjoy for a long time more. This will be my last video, I think, before Christmas, so I wish you a very Merry Christmas. Of course, very sad news to hear about Chris Rea. But he leaves the music behind, and that is a brilliant, fantastic legacy. Thank you, Chris, for the music, the memories, the legacy that you'll leave, and may you rest in peace.